President, I have to vote.
Okay, we have 4 members, 5 members, 6 members.
Yeah, everything's fine. They, this capital, that would make it a little different. So you got all these things that come along with the conversation.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a roll call, please.
Here.
Steve Balich.
Here.
Ray Tumalo.
Here.
Lori Summers.
Here.
Denise Winfrey.
Here.
John Perry.
Okay, we have a quorum. We have minutes from February 13th. Are there any additions or corrections? We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We also have executive session minutes from February 13th.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. First item, a new business. Case ZC 17051. Janine, you want to give us an update?
Zoning case ZC-17-0551 takes place in Green Garden Township. It is a map amendment from E2 to A1 on a 30.54 acre parcel. This parcel consists of a portion of a 36 acre parcel and vacated Lot 8 of Woodbridge Estates Second Edition. At the February Land Use and Development Committee, that Lot 8 was vacated and approved. And then also with that 36 acre parcel, 2.5 acres was divided through a minor subdivision, which was also heard at the February Land Use and Development Committee. The parcel was rezoned from A1 to E2 back in 2008 to create a subdivision. With the downturn in the economy, the applicant is now requesting to return back to A1 in order to create 3 A1 compliant parcels. There were no objections received for this case, and I did distribute a memo that we received this morning from Green Garden Township. They reviewed the case and recommended approval. Staff also recommended approval, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions by committee? We have a motion to approve. We have a motion.
Second.
Second. Any objectors to this? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, ZC 17071. Returning a special use permit for a solar farm. Jessica, you want to give us an update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Zoning case ZC-17-071 concerns a parcel in Washington Township. It's a request to build a 2-megawatt solar farm facility on a vacant 72.83 acre parcel. The actual solar farm development won't take up the entire parcel, approximately 17 acres more or less. There were no objectors present at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last week, and that commission voted 5-0 for approval with all of the conditions that staff had outlined. And so you did receive an email yesterday from a member of our staff with comments from Greenberg Furrow and Borrego Solar in regards to a couple of those conditions related to landscaping and the utility lines. We have reviewed those diagrams that they submitted, and we feel that the conditions do accurately reflect their intent. And our intention when we wrote those conditions that the landscaping would follow the perimeter of the solar development, which includes the arrays and the equipment, not necessarily the parcel boundary or the boundary of the special use area. So Their comments in that letter do reflect the intentions of those conditions, and we don't feel that they need to be modified, but by all means, the committee can modify those if they're unclear. And so that concludes my analysis. If you have any questions, I can answer.
Thank you. Any questions by the committee?
Sure. So, I don't know what email I sent, it wasn't either my typical one, I don't know where it went. So could you just go over that real briefly, please?
If you like, I can, do you want me to read the letter that they sent? They sent a letter with 2 attachments where they took their site plan, they specifically added landscaping to reflect kind of their intentions or how they want those conditions to be.
Just summarize it, that'd be great.
So, condition number 5 for this site specifically states, along the southern boundary of the project site, a landscape area at least 10 feet in width with at least 1 shrub per 5 linear feet, plus at least 1 evergreen tree per 25 linear feet of perimeter area must be provided. So it's interpreted that the southern boundary of that site would be just outside where the area of the solar panel area, and doesn't necessarily mean right along the road frontage. So I guess there was a discussion at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, how is this being interpreted? Is it supposed to be along the road frontage? Is it along the solar panel area outside of the fence? So our intent was exactly what the developer also wants, and we feel that the language doesn't need to be changed. And I can, if you want to see those site plans, just to get an idea of the difference, I can present them to you. That's a little bit further back.
That's fine. That's good.
So they just wanted that clarification and kind of represents our intent.
I think it should be.
And of course, if the developer does feel that, you know, the way that the condition is written is inaccurate or unclear, we can make those changes based on your recommendation. But we feel it does clearly state around the perimeter area of the project site. Not necessarily, again, that special use area boundary or parcel boundary, but where the solar panels will be installed, where that equipment will be installed right outside the fence. Okay.
Any other questions by the committee? I did receive those emails, and I agree with that our intent is to have the landscaping around the perimeter, so if they want it outside the fence, that's fine.
And then the second issue that they had was with the utility lines. The condition that we have specifically reads, on-site power lines and utility connections must be placed underground except where necessary to connect to existing overhead utility lines. The site plan that they showed does show that the utility lines will be underground until it reaches closer to the street where there will be a pole so that it can connect to the utility lines. So we felt that looking at that site plan, again, that condition would be met.
Okay, our intent was to allow them to have overhead lines connecting to common.
Where necessary, right. So that would be, the lines wouldn't be necessary throughout the entire 17 acres, only where it needs to go up near the road.
Okay. Did you want to hear from the developer?
Yeah, they said that they've had a little presentation they could give. I would like that, that'd be great.
Okay, if the petitioner would like to come up and give us a short presentation. State your names, please.
I'm Matt Walsh with Greenberg Farrow, and Justin Hart from Borrego Solar. So we have 3 cases today. 2 of them are right across the street from each other on Indiana Avenue. This first case is the north site. So we have 3 presentations. All the projects are very similar in their components. So we'll go through the first one in a little bit more detail, and if we want more presentations for the other 2, we can certainly give them and highlight the differences between each project. So basically the agenda for this presentation, just introduce our team. I'm Matt Walsh with Greenberg Farrell. We're the engineers and helping with permitting on these projects.
And Justin Hart, Borrego Solar, and what we typically do is just give an introduction to the company, gives you kind of a background. So Borrego Solar is an experienced developer in solar and now in storage across the U.S. Our office, Midwest headquarters, is in Chicago, so only about an hour away. But Borrego specializes in construction development, site plans, just mainly building these systems and making sure that we do all the diligence to make sure that the soil and everything else is adequate for development. Borrego does specialize in a couple different types of solar. Let's go to the next slide. We've made a list here of what you might see in Illinois. I just kind of segmented these into residential, community solar, utility scale, and behind the meter. Borrego does behind the meter, which is offsetting electrical load of a commercial building. Residential is on someone's house. We don't do residential, but we do specialize in community solar. So this is different than utility scale, as in there's a certain size cap that Illinois puts on these types of systems. So what you're seeing with all 3 of these is a 2 megawatt AC cap. And what these do is they'll connect into a distribution system and send electricity to the local electric body. So it'll have to stay within ComEd's network, but that's generally how it works. And then there's some background on the program that it's involved in. That's kind of the mechanism behind it. How we look at sites just in general, once we have an interested landowner to lease a certain piece of their property, most of these parcels are much larger than the solar development area is. So we'll take a look at where the landowner prefers the solar to be, and then we validate that area by many different tests. Those tests include a tile investigation report, archaeological phase 1, endangered species, wetlands, there's topography. There's a lot of different tests that validate that yes, in fact, we can build in this area. So once we have a confirmed area that we can build, then we'll move into what we'll talk about in the next slide of going through the project specifics.
So just to give a little bit of background about the community outreach that we've done, I'd like to apologize first for not reaching out to the representatives for each district. But Borrego has given a presentation to the board at a different time, I believe about 2 months ago, giving an overview of the program. So hopefully you have some familiarity with this particular developer. As a part of this project, we followed staff's recommendation to meet with the township, Washington Township, Village of Beecher, Beecher Fire Protection District. And we've had 4 public hearings on this. So we've had one with the Village of Beecher, 2 with Washington Township, and 1 at the previous Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At the result of each one of those meetings, we received unanimous approval from everybody. So we've had a recommendation up to this point to proceed with the project from each of those bodies. Some of them had some conditions attached to them which were provided to staff, and I think they've been incorporated fairly within the conditions that staff's prepared for this committee's review. In addition, so just a little bit of background on where this project is located. It's just west of the Village of Beecher, or just east of the Village of Beecher, just east of the intersection of Indiana Avenue and Cottage Grove. And this is just a rendering of the site. Just a little bit of background to reiterate what staff had indicated. The overall parcel's about 73 acres, but the project area itself will only take up approximately 17.3 acres. It's one 2 megawatt system, and we're exceeding all the setback requirements. We're not asking for any variances at this point. And we've been working with the county DOT to permit the driveways. So we've already been in discussion. There will probably be some right-of-way dedication associated with this project, which has already been engaged, and we've already started that process.
One second. In comparison, the other one that we approved, how many acres was that property? 46?
The one,
Three. That was 40, 40 something?
42.
42.
But
Well, how many
they were-
megawatt system was that?
Well, I think initially it was a bigger megawatt system was anticipated. During the public hearing, they indicated they probably wouldn't put in that kind of system. I want to say, wasn't it 5
It
megawatts?
was 2, I believe.
For the previous one, 5, but I think they indicated that they would
Drop
probably
it to
only
2.
end up putting
With
in
2.
2 megawatts.
Okay, that's, I'm just trying to get the comparison of those. Thank you. Go ahead.
So this is the rendering a little bit closer in. As you can see, there's a nearby house that's approximately 1,300 feet away, but there's a large wetland area that, with a lot of trees around it, that buffers this particular residential property. So both us and, per the staff's recommendation at the commission last week, we feel that there's adequate screening on the west side with the existing landscape. As discussed earlier, we've received clarification on buffering landscape along the frontage. So this project will comply with that once we move into the permitting stage, assuming that that condition is not revised. A little bit of background about the project. The system is set on I-beams that will either be screwed or driven into the ground. And there's no concrete associated with them at this point. We have geotechnical consultants that will advise us on these, but at this point, all the systems that are proposed are just driven into the ground. So it makes it easy to remove the racking system. On top of the racking system, there's the modules or solar panels that will stand at a maximum tilt of plus or minus 7 feet. Around the perimeter of the system, there's a 7-foot chain link fence. So it's approximately the same height as what the maximum incline of the panels will be at their peak. The panels do rotate with the sun, so at noon they'll be, or at maximum solar gain will be approximately flat, so they'll only be 4.5 feet tall. So these are pretty low impact systems visually. The transformer is about 6.5 feet tall. That's located right in the center of the site at the end of the driveway here. The driveway itself, I believe the plans we submitted said 14 feet. We received comments from the fire department that they would prefer 18 feet, which we will again comply with once we move into the permitting stage of this project. The 7-foot chain link fence around the perimeter has no barbed wire. As far as grading goes, there's very little grading associated with these projects. They try to keep the ground kind of the way that it is and work with the contours. As far as runoff goes, there's existing row crops which create a lot more storm water than the meadow mix that's proposed to be planted underneath the panels. So this should help with any stormwater concerns and slow the runoff down a little bit. We've also engaged a bunch of consultants that have done drain tile studies. The drain tiles, if any are impacted, they'll be replaced or repaired. So any subsurface drainage will continue the way that it is right now. We received letters of no objection from the IDNR for endangered species, IHPA for archaeological studies. The drain tiles, like I said, have been studied themselves, and we don't think that there's going to be any impacts, and if there are, they'll be repaired. We've submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers. Currently, we're not impacting any wetlands. The only adjacent wetland is right outside the project area, and you can see the dashed line is the buffer there. We're not impacting it, so we're expecting the Army Corps to come back with a letter of no objection. The LISA did say that the farmland was high quality. However, these systems are considered temporary. After the term of the lease is completed, the systems are completely removable. And it can return back to agricultural land very easily. Really the only piece of concrete is below the transformer and inverter at the end of the access drive. So that piece of concrete can be easily removed once the project is decommissioned. Just to give a little bit of context, there's approximately 230,000 acres of farmland in this county, and this project will take up less than 1/100% of that land. So it's not a lot of impact to the overall farm agricultural production. And just to give you a few pictures, this is kind of what the systems look like. You can see in this one, this is what the transformer looks like. This is kind of a typical layout for the panels. I think this is more representative of what the ground plane will look like once it's fully planted. And then just a couple of frequently asked questions. Construction's 4 to 6 months. During construction, there's 1 to 2 delivery trucks that are making deliveries per day. During that period, the maximum truck weight is 80,000 pounds, which is a typical semi. So it's not anything like a wind farm or something having massive loads that come into the site. As far as once the project's up and running, it's remotely monitored. So any issues that come up or anything can be sent back to the monitoring station, and the owner be notified that they need to come out to the site to adjust either a panel that's not working properly or any other issue that's coming up on site. There are trips about 3 to 4 times a year, typically pickups with mowing equipment that maintain the site. And then there's also about 1 to 2 trips, 3 to 4 trips a year for equipment maintenance, washing panels, repairing anything. In addition, there's no pesticides or herbicides or fertilizers that are anticipated, so that kind of helps with the whole idea of keeping this green, and it allows the farmland to kind of allow nutrients to return to the soil without using any chemicals. As far as decommissioning goes, the system's completely removable. We've submitted a decommissioning estimate that essentially showed that the scrap value of the system is about equal to what the cost to remove it is. During the last meeting that we had with the Planning and Zoning Commission, it was indicated that the county, as I understand it, has come to an understanding that they don't want to be involved in the bonding of these projects. So we've addressed it in the lease agreement, which has been submitted to staff previously with our initial submission, that shows that there's a commitment from Borrego to the landlord that the system will be removed, and provides means for legal recourse if that doesn't happen. And then the last couple of things are potential impacts. So noise for this particular project, the loudest piece of equipment is the transformer and inverter that's at the center of the site. We purposely located as far away from property lines as possible. The nearest property line for this particular project is 375 feet. At the property line, the audible noise will be what the existing ambient noise is, so essentially it won't be audible. These projects provide increased tax revenue, so they're attractive because they have very low impacts on the schools, or no impacts on the schools, library, the roads. After construction's over, there's very little traffic that's generated by these projects, so the taxing bodies benefit, and there's not a lot of use of public resources. And then as far as impacts to property values, there's a lot of studies out there that show renewable energy doesn't have any impact on adjacent properties. It's a misconception that a lot of people don't understand, especially in new states where they're coming in and they haven't seen solar yet. These projects are not wind, they're low impact, they're visually, they're screened, they're low profile. And in fact, last night we were in Stevenson County and they just had a report commissioned for wind power out there, which is a lot more visual. And I think it was their assessor that had it prepared, and it indicated that there was no changes in property values for any properties that were adjacent to wind. So I don't know if you want to go.
Yeah, and we just put a slide up here, kind of the added benefits of solar to the community. We pulled this from EPA website to give you an idea of how many cars this offsets, how many trees this would equate to taking carbon off, et cetera. So this is for your resource, but it's just an added benefit on top of stabilizing the grid, adding tax revenue, being green, this is health benefits as well.
I should say the two conditions that we submitted yesterday to staff that we were asking for clarification on, I think the landscape condition, we understood it, and we understood it the same as staff. It was the Planning and Zoning Commission that was asking questions about where it was supposed to be located. So we were asking that condition to be revised to clearly state where the landscape for staff would prefer to be located, or any other commission that, or committee that would prefer to have it located there. And then the other one was the overhead power lines that are necessary to make connection to the ComEd grid. Our thought is we probably won't be going for permit for another 6 months if we're fortunate enough to get approved for the use at the earliest. And I think the discussion that was had at the commission supported what we're asking for, but we're fearful that nobody's going to remember that unless the conditions change to accurately reflect what was discussed as far as having overhead power lines required to make the connection. So if there's any questions?
Any questions by committee?
I have one question. Yeah. Is this a completely different system than the last one we looked at? Because the last one we looked at full deflection, it was up 12 feet, it was over the 7 foot, and that was one of the concerns, where this gentleman said that at full deflection, it's only going to be up 7 foot, it's not even going to be higher than the surrounding fence, which I kind of like that system, obviously, a little better than the previous one.
You don't prefer that to Sam or Jean, because they worked on the previous case.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what racking supplier that they were using, but the one that we have, it just requires a certain, I think at the highest tilt from ground to the edge of the bottom, it'll just need to be 32 inches, and there's a certain degree that equates to roughly 7 feet. So I'm not sure actually what racking, but maybe that's the change.
I didn't know if it was the size difference, 5 megawatt, 2 megawatt, it just, okay. It's just, I mean, to me, just, we were so worried about aesthetics last time, and when the gentleman did say, you know, there's no fence that's going to be able to cover the height of the, at full deflection, you know, here I'm hearing that there is a fence that's.
I don't recall what Cypress Creek's maximum tilt was, unfortunately. I believe that the idea was that once the vegetation had matured around the system, that it would be taller than the 7-foot fence and would buffer anything beyond the fence line. But all of these tracker systems are very, very similar, they'll tell you. So we could look back at the minutes and confirm and
Okay.
discuss, or I can get verification, but they should be very similar in nature, all of these projects. And they're all, for the most part, going to be around 2 megawatts, just so you know. So they'll all be about 20 acres.
Is there, no, this is just a question for staff, is there a maximum amount of permits that Will County would allow for that? Are we going to set some kind of parameters? Because one of my concerns is, while this is a subsidized program by the state, and they're going to, that's why we're going to see influx, because while the state and you and I are paying for these, they're going to be coming forward to get, you know, to take advantage of it. But in the end, we have to make sure that we don't have so many of these that we start deteriorating one of the greatest assets we have in the county, and that's our export of goods. And I understand you said there's 20-something thousand, you know, acres, but we just have to be careful from a farming standpoint that we don't start, you know, putting through 4 or 5 of these a month or 2 of these a month. As they start coming online, I would be interested in making sure that we don't upset the balance of our one of our greatest trade agreements, our export of farming goods.
So, as far as I am aware, there is no limit on how many are to be approved in a given year. However, I do think it's important to note that some of these projects may not get approval from ComEd. Some of them, you know, depending on the conditions they receive, the economics may change for the project, and they may decide not to move forward on that particular project if they can build it cheaper elsewhere. And so I think it's highly unlikely that we'll see all of the projects that get approved, if they get approved, actually be built.
Okay, I just think we should just make sure that we are monitoring
Absolutely.
it, because if it does become a situation where the ComEd is saying, okay, you know what, it's cheaper to go this route, and while the taxpayers are subsidizing it, let's just keep throwing them in. I want to make sure that we are protecting ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to point out that from the beginning of these solar farms, you know, it's a good idea if they can make a profit, but they're not really making a profit. They're getting tax dollars from our taxpayers to make a profit. So the state of Illinois has run out of money. So there's a point in time, whenever, and I couldn't tell you when, but these incentives are going to go away because they can't pay their bills. So now when they all go away, what happens to these? We got to decommission everything. So what Ray was talking about is really an important thing, because we don't want to end up having all these farms that depend on their existence and their business plan for tax dollars. And I don't like subsidizing a business, that, you know, making a business a profit just because they get tax money.
So the incentives are actually not from tax dollars, they're from ratepayer funds, which are line items on your utility bills.
Yeah,
So-
but whether it comes from the tax dollar or the utility bill, the people still got to pay it. I mean, I don't care where it comes from. If it's not coming from a profit generated by the business, it's coming from a profit generated by human beings that live here. Whether it's tax dollars or on their electric bill or on some other fee. But if you take that incentive away, all the solar farms go away.
Sure, and the contracts, just, all I'm doing is providing information for your decision-making is, the contracts for the incentives are 15-year contracts with the utility. So that does commit them to be producing for 15 years at minimum, if they're going to accept the incentives.
Again, if their incentives go away and they go out of business, what are they going to do? Sue a rock?
No, that doesn't work.
Yeah, there's a few different things that Illinois and the federal government put in place. You know, the program is called an adjustable block program, so the incentive actually starts decreasing after a certain amount of capacity is filled in a certain block. So the justification is we're trying to incentivize growth and development and then scale it down. So whether it be ratepayers, et cetera, the incentive or the fees to incentivize developers to build in the state are actually decreasing, kind of in line with cost of construction. So that's one thing. So the hope is to not have anything that's helping to develop these. But another, again, the tax credit too, that is also scaling down. But Illinois put this program together. I mean, it's called the Illinois Jobs Act. I think it's Illinois Future Energy Jobs Act. So the point of it being trying to create growth in the economic sphere of creating jobs. And this builds stability to the grid by scattering resources across the state. So consumers or customers of ComEd benefit this in a lot of different ways, just by not having all of your energy assets in one area, but by scattering these and connecting it to the distribution system. So that's the point. That's why they adjusted the portfolio standard to include more renewables and scattered across the state.
So this does phase out over a period of years, these incentives.
Correct.
So that would be a natural thing that would keep the growth from expanding and filling up the countryside.
Correct, and there's also a technical limit too on how much solar can actually be on a certain line. So a substation has a certain amount of a capacity for renewables to fulfill it without significant upgrades to the line, and that's what staff was just saying about the cost that ComEd and the utilities will impose on the developers to upgrade the lines to be able to receive that electricity. There's a certain amount that can happen without a huge fee, and that will prohibit certain sites from being developed due to that high cost. So there's a technical limit.
Lori, you have a question?
And just because I have an understanding of it, as we're talking, you just explained thoroughly about how the money that you do receive or the rate that's added on to the users of the electricity decreases over years. You guys cannot get a tip. Am I right about that? Because you trade in the open market.
Can you say that again?
You are not eligible for a tip.
Maybe I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Tax incentive finance.
Yes. No.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, unlike which we have other huge businesses, such as intermodals and that type of thing, that do receive those tips. So that, again, that's not coming off the taxpayer's roll. So that was one of the things that made me very excited about this, is that, that'll do that, and more tax dollars coming back to the villages and the townships. Okay, thank you.
One thing I think you just brought up that's very important when you stated that there's only so many of these that could be on a line, because that could be the limiting thing. Because I'm only going to vote for so many of these, and I'm going to, not cut into, some of the things that I believe that Will County is made up of those in our farming community. So that could be the limiting factor right there, without the county having to actually put in place anything that would limit this. So I would be curious though, Sam, and I know this is probably a lot of work. I'm curious to know, is that 50 of these, 100 of these, 10 of these? I mean, that's something that you don't have to answer today, but I would be curious in the future, because I want to make sure that, like I said, I'm only going to vote for so many of these before I feel uncomfortable doing it. Thank you.
Lauren?
Judy, just stay with us.
Julie, Lori. It's all District 1.
Right. So I have a question. So when we are approving these special use permits, is the understanding that they yet have not been approved by ComEd? Okay.
Most of the time that it's me, so you guys have probably done a pre-application.
We're currently in the impact study on
Okay.
all 3 of these.
So you're still waiting to see exactly what that cost piece of the equation is going to be. And so you don't really know until, the next 6 months or so, if you're going to build or not.
Yeah, so, and just to follow up on that, there's 3 different types of studies that we have to go through. And the second study gives you an approximate fee, but the last one will give you the actual fees. So we're basing our assumption on the economics of this on that second study, but it of course has to go to the third. And before you can pull a building permit, and before you can actually receive the state dollars to build these systems, you have to have your non-ministerial permits in hand. You also have to have your interconnection agreement before you even build it. So if those economics don't pencil, you can't build anyway. So.
Okay, so you guys will inform us. I assume if they don't get the approval, they have to let you guys know that they're not going to bid and then build it?
That would be a question for Janine, or I think Janine's nodding her head no.
Just, I want to know when we would know about it, whether we approve these special use permits, and then whether, I know the company has to go in there, pools, try and get the money for this to do it, and everything like that. So will you guys inform us as to which companies allow, oh, I didn't see it, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's on. Board Member Ogala, a special use permit, once it's approved, only has a 1-year period that it's valid. And if they don't act on it within that first year, they can ask for a 180-day extension. So that's kind of a way of tracking to see where we're at. So if we don't hear from them by the time we get down to 10, 11 months, then we check in and say, hey, do you want to extend this permit? And then they'll have to go through that process, which can only be done for 2 180-day extension periods, and then it's not valid at all.
Okay, so that's good. So we find out.
That's one way we can find out.
One way we
We
can
will definitely
find out.
follow up, and if they don't move forward, we'll let the committee know.
Because it would just be nice to know, because I know we're approving them, and then they still have to go through a lot of processes to even be able to build it. And so, I think I'm right on this, is so the reason why ComEd has this is they're charged for some energy credits for clean energy versus the energy that they produce. And because of that, we all have a line item on our ComEd bill that is paying for that amount. So I've never seen a bill go down in my life, ever. I've never seen a line item come off. I used to work for Will Township Road District, and when y'all remember when the fuel rates went high, they put a fuel utility cost or something on there. It's never gone off your bills. It's still on there. So I don't know that anything goes away, because I think they just continue to use it. So I think the presentation was good. I'm glad that you guys gave it. I hope that, as far as I'm concerned, if there is a solar farm proposed for my district, I would like to know from staff for sure, because we were not included in the meetings with the village or the township. And I mean, I heard about them through conversations with those people. I'm assuming that's how Lori found out about it too. We were in meetings and other meetings. But it's good to have firsthand knowledge, because if people call us about it, then I just say, I don't know, it's not on my agenda yet.
Okay, any other comments by committee? We have a motion to approve.
Tom, can I ask a second, couple questions?
Okay.
I don't think this is working, but real quickly, on the special use, can we make that special use contingent on the fact that they get all other permits that are required? I'm asking the question. I mean, there could be some conditions that they have to obtain all the other types of permits for that we need.
If the committee wanted to add that as a condition, they could.
Well, I'm just pointing out, there is a way, if that's a concern, I think you could put that condition on that the permit is contingent on the fact that they would get all other permits that are necessary for the project. So I'm just pointing that out.
I would caution that, just because to be able to receive the funding necessary to build this, and then you would pull building permit and electrical permits and stuff, you will have to have your non-ministerials in hand. So I don't know if conditions of an approval is actually an approval. That would be one that we would definitely be hesitant. I don't know what that would entail. I just know it's have to have.
I'm asking the question, maybe it entails, maybe it hampers it, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, I'm asking the question. The other question I have is about the decommissioning. You know, we did in the ordinance say that there has to be a decommissioning provision in the lease. Did we actually say there had to be a decommissioning plan? I'm asking the question because I can't recall.
Sam?
So is there a decommissioning plan that actually goes along with this?
They do have to submit a decommissioning plan.
Right.
And part of the benefit of us having that is if for any reason we had to decommission as the county, and we would know exactly what,
So
approximately
they,
costs and
would
procedures.
still do the plan, and then it would be filed with the county, so we can see what it is.
Yes, that is correct. And to answer your prior question, they wouldn't get a building permit if they didn't get their interconnection agreement. And so it is, even though the special use permit may be approved by committee, it technically is contingent on whether or not they get those other, they don't get financing, if they don't get approved by ComEd, they're not going to get a building permit.
But the special use is still there.
Yes, that is correct.
I mean, that's my,
So, just for clarification on how I may assist, you're inquiring if we can if they come back to us and say, we didn't get one of these permits, we can disable the special use permit effective period prior to its 1-year expiry? Is that what you're asking?
yeah, well, I would say that you may think it's unusual for us to do this, but it's not. We put conditions on special uses frequently, and part of it is you're telling us you need all these other types of permits to go forward. Why, I don't, it's not, I guess it is a condition of the special use, but I don't see where that's a big.
So you could condition the expiration date of the permit. I would turn to Brian or David on if you can add a condition that would change the expiration of the permit.
Well, we do 6 months and 6 months or something. I know that might require an ordinance.
Yeah, I would say that the construction cycle would definitely, we most likely will start construction after crop season this year. So that would put us in October, November, and if you condition that to 6 months, I think we're before we even start construction. That's what I would caution.
Well, my concern is this, it's not solar fields or farms, whatever you want to call them. It's that when we start doing this, what do you know, the next person that's not this industry says, well, you give me the permit, and I don't have anything ready either. I mean, you're kind of setting a precedent. If you want to, well, I have some concerns about the precedent it sets that, that the permit, special use permit,
is based on a lot of other factors that are not on this project. Or they need additional approvals, whether they're state approvals, whether they're ComEd approvals, I don't know.
And it is kind of a timing issue because in order to get financing and in order to get the other permits through ComEd, usually they're required to hold the special use permit.
Well, and then the other thing is I have to say to myself, are you here prematurely?
No. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding this. In order for you to get your financing, in order for you to get the okay from ComEd to take the energy that you would produce, you have to have the special use permit in hand before they'll even look at you. If they get none of the above, the project is not going to take place. Layman's terms, I know, but is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Okay.
Judy?
So they have to get into like a bid pool to get this financing. So their company, along with several others, will get in. So like they had a bidlet in, I think, September last year, something like that. Bidding was in August, and they found out who won those bids in September. So some solar farm down in southern Illinois, it was a big megawatt, I don't know, 300-400 acres, I think it was, ended up winning all that. So this is the next one. Do you guys know when it's coming out?
Yeah, I would just clarify that these are two separate programs. So the one you just referenced
Okay.
is an auction-based.
And
They're
this
all
is not
within-
auction-based?
It is not. So this is it's adjustable block program. So basically the price is set that you have when you have these non-ministerial permits, the county approval, and in your interconnection agreement, you will submit, and then you will be on one of those blocks, depending on your position or timing that you're submitting for. So it's actually, you're not bidding a price, you know the price, and you're just bidding your project. And then, I guess timing-wise, you're going to fall into one of those blocks, and the price scales down depending on how, your position in that block program.
So if you're in that block program, then you are guaranteed those dollars?
I don't know, guarantee's a strong word, but
Well,
most
guarantee
likely,
you,
yeah.
especially
It
use
seems
permits,
it
so.
seems that is correct.
Okay, are there any objectors to this proposal? No objectors? Okay. Do you want us to amend our conditions that you'd asked for, or not? Or do you believe what staff says is?
You know what, Tom, I'll say, I'm bringing this up probably in a very timely fashion. I wouldn't necessarily hold them up, but I would tell you, I think we need to give it some thought. Maybe we create a different classification on, maybe for solar farms, or maybe, I think we need to take a look at it. I'm not going to hold them up. They need to go forward. It seems to me, as in general, they're here earlier than they need to be. It's kind of like, but if this is kind of the process, I guess I probably need a better understanding of it. But because it was an issue, it was brought up. I don't want to do something that stops us from going forward. I certainly want to protect the county and the residents of the county.
Well, we know that special use permits expire if they don't do it, so we know that's going to be a limiting factor.
That's true, and that's true.
Judy, if I can.
And we don't have to extend it.
The order of operations of permits, if I can add to that, I think the approach is appropriate here because we're talking about use. So if a body decides that this use isn't appropriate for the site, the permits that would have been needed really aren't relevant. So really this is important to be one of the first stops is to determine whether the county feels solar is appropriate for this particular parcel. So I guess that's the order of operations. If that is passed, then we can follow the rest of the steps here to get more permits. And obviously, any jurisdiction that we need a permit from, if we don't obtain it, we'd be in violation of that jurisdiction's municipal code or whatever governing ordinance that they have.
Okay. Judy?
Yeah, question, so like when does the lease with the landowner begin? So like you're saying you wouldn't start anything until after fall, after harvest is done. so that the crops that are planted now, well, not yet, but will be planted, they'll be harvested. And so then, when does your lease with the landowner begin? And I guess that answers my question first.
When construction starts.
When construction starts, so at no point in time would it be that whoever's, I don't know who's farming the parcel right now, but whoever's farming the parcel, their crops would be removed prior to you guys beginning construction?
Correct, yeah. And we have a clause in all of our leases if we do have to do a test when there are crops on the field. So most likely one of the tests that we do is a geotechnical test. And we typically don't release that work until after we get an understanding of the county's, are they going to approve this project? Because it is a very expensive test. This one is not applicable here, but other projects, that test usually happens, most likely it'll probably happen after crops are planted. So we put in a clause that has crop compensation that's agreed upon on the tenant farmer or the landowner, whoever's farming it, that they agree on a certain number. If we do disrupt their crops, that this is what we're going to pay for it.
Okay, so then if the harvest season is unusually wet and the farmer's not able to get in by, and get the crops off that field by a certain time, then you wouldn't expect them to lose that crop, or do you pay them for that crop?
That's correct, yeah. And we have a certain, I think it's 18 months after you receive the allocation with the state that we have to build the system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Pardon?
Who made the motion, who seconded?
Denise made it, and I seconded.
Move.
Second.
Right here.
Denise and Steve. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next case. Jessica, want to give us the next case?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Zoning case ZC-17-072, as Matt Walsh had mentioned, is just south of ZC 17071. Similar in size, the actual special use area, the solar farm development, the actual parcel is a lot larger, 117 acres approximately. But they do mirror each other, and you'll see the conditions are very similar as well. This one has one additional condition because there are residences located to the southwest of the parcel. So we are requesting additional landscaping along the fence line on that side, just to kind of soften the transition to the solar panel development. Again, no objectors to this one either. And then we really didn't have much attendance from either the landowners that are nearby there, from anybody else that brought up sort of discussion about that landscaping, but staff did feel that it was necessary to put that in. And again, to address the same comments as the previous case, looking at the site plan that they submitted and that we emailed to the committee yesterday, we do feel that the language is on par with their intent and our intentions to put that landscaping outside the fence. And as well, it appears that the utility lines will be underground, except where necessary to put in a pole to connect to that utility line. So those were kind of the similar things addressed in both cases. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval, no changes to the condition. They recommended, there were 5 commissioners present at that meeting. So I'll take any questions you may have.
Any questions by the committee?
Move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any objectors to this? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next case, Jenny?
Zoning case ZC-18-002 is also similar to the cases that Jess just presented. However, this one takes place over in Manhattan Township. The parcel is 74.33 acres total. The special use area is 14.87 acres. The parcel is bordered by residential properties directly to the south. There is an A2 parcel, which is residential, and then there is an A1 parcel that is residential. You will see that staff's conditions address landscaping along the project site to those areas and also within the area that borders the road because it is within 1,000 feet. Staff recommended approval with 14 conditions, and the Planning and Zoning Commission also unanimously recommended approval with those 14 conditions. There were no objectors to this case, but at the Planning and Zoning Commission, we did have the Manhattan Township Supervisor attend, and he spoke about the township meetings that they had regarding this proposal. As you will see, you also received a memo from Matt Walsh regarding the landscaping and then also regarding those utilities. This one is a little different than what Jess was talking about. So again, the landscaping, we referenced the project site. So we are talking outside of the fence area, just along the project site, the developed area. So we feel that we are on par with what the developer is asking for as well. However, this site is a little different in regards to condition number 8 with the underground versus above ground utility lines. This site has a pipeline. So the applicant would like the entirety to be above ground due to that underground pipeline, that they cannot run the underground utility lines at this site. Staff did make mention to this at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but they did not change or amend the condition. So if you would like to amend the condition, we could add in some language, that may say, except when underground conditions prohibit the utility lines to be run, or we could just completely remove condition number 8.
Judy?
So can you please let me, what township is this in? I'm sorry.
This is Manhattan Township.
Manhattan Township. So Jim, this is your area?
Yep. I'm ready to make comment.
All right, I just want to make that clear.
I don't see a problem with amending condition 8 if it's near the pipeline that we allow them to have overhead lines rather than disrupting the pipeline. Comments, Jim?
Well, I can take a little different view and say you picked the wrong site if you got pipelines there and the conditions are not suitable to run the underground lines, then it's a site you shouldn't have selected. So, so here again, I would say when you start making exceptions or conditions, I could create more issues down the line. And
Well,
maybe not to have a lot of overhead lines, even though overhead lines are going to be run. I'm just pointing out, just because there's pipelines there, doesn't mean we have to change, because they've selected a site with pipelines.
Maybe the petitioner can show us where the pipeline is.
Well, it doesn't matter, Tom. To me, it doesn't matter. The matter is they want to run overhead lines because there's pipelines there.
Well, the line's going to be over the whole site or just over
I'm
the
saying,
pipeline?
maybe they selected the wrong site, and, so why do we need to change our ordinance or give them an exceptional condition? Think about make comments. I have some other questions I'd like to ask. So, the concerns of Manhattan Township, did we address those concerns? Were there changes made to address their concerns? I'm just wondering, did they have any concerns when they left?
Sure. So Manhattan Township Supervisor came and spoke about the letter that was submitted, and that was included as a memo as part of your packet with staff's reports. We talked through all of them at the Planning and Zoning Commission and addressed their concerns. The one issue was it would have been So they spoke about the, here we go. It would have been the second bullet points, that a financial guarantee of decommissioning of this project whenever it becomes necessary will be approved by the Will County State's Attorney's Office. So that is, again, something that we have discussed before, and the commission, the committee, and the county board did not put any sort of a financial assurance or surety bond into the zoning ordinance update. So the applicants are not being held to put up any kind of a bond for decommissioning. That would be the one issue that was left outstanding, because it was not the county board's desire to do that. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not add it in as a condition. So that would really be the only one.
And we have talked about having some type of bond. And I think we should revisit that, but it's not part of our ordinance currently. And that was their only concern in the end?
Yeah, everything else was pretty much dropped.
They just want to guarantee, and I do know they have some county guarantee it, we're not guaranteeing it, so. But in the future, rate, that's something we would take a look at. But getting back to the site conditions, there again, I'm going to say that if you selected the site, and our preference is to have as much underground cabling as we can possibly have, then why should we change? Because they picked a site with conditions that are not going to meet what we really desire these facilities to be. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I think I made my point. And quite honestly, no matter what they say, they selected the site with the conditions. So,
Sam, do you have a display that shows where the pipeline is?
Oh, right here.
Could you explain that? Could you explain where the pipeline is and where you need to change the wiring?
Yeah, so there's 3 pipelines on this property. There's one to the northwest corner. I don't think it's actually identified, but that one is Buckeye pipeline, and we've received a letter of no objection that they're fine with it. There's also one to the far east running north-south. We've received a letter of no objection for that pipeline as well. But the one that's of concern, and the reason why we're asking for an amendment on condition number 8, is the one that's indicated with that pointing out right there, and that's owned by BP. And we are going through their design process, and we've been in constant communication to make sure that we're not disrupting that pipeline by any means. Location specific, I mean, there's certain characteristics of this site that prohibit us from moving, one of which is wetlands, pipeline, et cetera. But wetlands kind of, you see those circles and their buffer zones, prohibit us from building within those and triggering additional Army Corps permits.
There's no pipelines under your panels?
Correct, yeah. And there's a reason for that. I mean, if you do build over a pipeline, the pipeline has rights to be able to repair at any point. They will be senior to your lease, and that's not financeable.
Where's the ComEd line that you need to connect with?
Runs along the driveway here. Yeah.
So the overhead line would just be along the driveway? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, and then the other part would be under basically the conditions that we talked about of being able to connect to the grid.
So everything inside the green box would continue to be underground, as the same as all other projects we presented.
Okay. Well, I don't see a problem with allowing overhead line along the driveway. That's what you're asking for?
That's correct.
Anybody else on the committee have a problem with that?
Well, I personally, I mean, I feel like, now, I just spoke 10 minutes ago about how we're gonna, put limits on, now we've had 3 in the last 10 minutes. And looking at this, it really doesn't look like it's the best site to have one of these. I don't know, to me, in my opinion, we're trying to avoid the pipelines, we're avoiding the wetlands, we're just, I don't know, it looks like they're pointing it in to me, but,
That's true.
I mean, that's just.
That's what they,
Well, they want to get their conclusion on it, they need to do it.
Well,
Is this on the same line as the other 2?
No, these are
Oh,
different
so
sites.
now, okay, we're really gonna have to decide about how many we're bringing in, because now if there's 100 different lines in Will County, I mean, we could have these things popping up like popcorn.
Yeah, it's really how many substations Will County has. And the type of lines, these are unique type of lines. So they have to be three-phase lines, and it has to be in proximity to a substation. So that kind of limits the scope.
Okay, any other questions, Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I agree with Mr. Moose's, he makes a good point. If these companies are going to select sites, they should make sure that they correspond to what their county's already saying. You know, so if we make exemptions every single time, so that they could, they can get their incentives and move forward, what's the point even coming here? Just tell them to go do it. So I'm going to be a no on this.
Okay. Laura?
Just so I know, do you select the sites or do the landowners reach out to you?
Both, but most likely it's the landowner reaching out to us.
Okay, thank you.
So the landowner reaches out to you, don't you guys send landowners letters?
That's correct.
So you send the letter to the landowners in a wide area, and then those that are interested come to you?
That's one method. We had, I guess, better success on referral basis. So if one landowner received a letter, and then typically their buddy will have a parcel, that's usually a quicker way and an easier way to develop sites. So it's half and half. I would say probably early this year was predominantly letters, but now we're trying to transition to more referral basis.
Yeah, so that is because a lot of times the property owner is not farming the property, they have a tenant farmer, and so the solar farm pays the tenant more per acre than the tenant farmer would pay. So you might pay 160, 180, 200, 250 to farm a property, where they're going to be paying significantly more. So the landowner looks at it as, he doesn't care, he's only getting so much off that acre anyway. So then it really does come down to how do we feel about how many solar farms we want popping up all over Will County as an issue. That's our decision to make, Steve, right? Yeah.
The bottom line, though, would still be the same. Unless ComEd feels there's a need for that power to be put to the grid, and there is a transformer near there, you won't get approved.
That's correct. Yeah, if it's too far away or the energy is overloading that circuit, then that would prohibit us from building, and that would be one of the two requirements to be able to receive the state funding.
If I can quickly add to the proliferation comment of solar, there's only so many incentives available. So almost every county that's within ComEd's territory is going through this as well. And I would say, as far as our experience goes, this is not one of the communities that's getting the most applications at this point. So this is the fourth project, as I understand it, that's been presented to you. We've been to other communities that have had 4 different community solar developers on the same night. So these incentives are going to be used up quickly. You're probably going to see a lot of projects in the next couple months once all the incentives are accounted for. You want to, as a community, I would suggest that you might want to consider the benefits to the community and being receptive to the idea of trying to get as many as you can while they're available.
One of the things that we're forgetting, what Ray said about how many we're going to have. Well, every time we get a solar farm, that inhibits farming on that piece of property. And if I'm not mistaken, the land out in District 1 is one of the most valuable pieces in the county. So we're losing all that good farmland to some company that's, no offense to you guys, but coming in and getting incentives to go do a job. And we're losing our food. So I think it's important what Ray said, that we really look at how many we're going to have, and then we shouldn't be saying, okay, well, it's better for you to do this. We're going to help you guys make money by changing our rules. It's different than, like when we're talking about building codes and all that stuff. We're arguing that for the last 8 months. But this is something different to me. Like I said, I'm kind of frustrated.
Can I want to make one more comment, and I won't say anything else. First of all, it's the owner of the land's decision to put the solar farm there. For me, as I watch all the farmland, and I grew up there, you guys, okay? I want everything to go back to the way it was, and if that was the case, my dad would still be alive, okay? That's not how it works. These families are dividing these farms down because the kids, most of them, Judy, do not want to farm it. I would rather see them do something like this than to sell it, put up a subdivision, or pave over it. This can be returned to farmland when it's all said and done, if that's what they choose to do. So you really aren't losing the farmland. To me, we're saving it by doing this.
Judy, do you have a comment?
Yes, so this is very much like all the things that are happening in Will County. When we have these mega truck facilities that want to build, they're buying 2,000 acres and paving over it and putting in intermodal facilities. The landowner has the right to sell their property to a private company. The company then does whatever it needs to do to be able to put in their intermodal facility. So in this case, the landowner has a right to agree to a lease. But as a county board, we also have to look at what do we want to happen in the county and how much as a county are we going to build. I agree, Lori, that a solar farm is better than an intermodal facility any day.
And that's not what what I said was cementing over it, putting it.
You're not concreting over it, right. So the land would still essentially remain the same 15 years from now. Depending on what else happens in the area, you don't know whether it will go back to ag land or not. The landowner would have the right to make the decision to sell it or not.
I got one last comment, Tom, and I promise I'll stop speaking. I think what I'm hearing is that there are limited amounts of permits that they're going to give out, a limited amount of credits that they're going to give out. But there are a lot of acres of farmland, what we heard as well. I think at the end of the day, we just have to pick locations that are smart and conducive to putting these on there. I voted yes on the first two. I'm a little leery about this one where we have pipelines and the Army Corps in the back with the wetlands. To me, it looks like we're just shoehorning it on a map, and that's why I'm feeling uncomfortable with this particular project.
Jim?
I will not promise this is my last comment. Those who did, I'm going to hold them to it. So, look, they select sites based on, I assume, what's going to be, that they're near a line, the ones that are going to be least costly for them to develop, and most profitable for them. Going under pipelines is not going to be the most profitable way of developing, the most efficient way overhead. And I see it, I don't necessarily have a big problem. They're not that much overhead line. But my point is if you're just going to compromise or do a selection that's going to be economically most beneficial to the developer, then I think that's the tail wagging the dog. So our decisions should not be based on what's the most economically advantageous for the developer. And I think when you start making these exceptions because of conditions that of the property they're selecting, I'd be very reluctant to give them any additional special considerations. And as far as the development of these type of facilities, some of it is a property right issue for me. So it's like I don't think we should go down the line and start telling property owners how they can use their property. So I would say be cautious with that. I can tell you that I can take 4 houses in my district who've taken up more farmland than they're going to take up on this solar. When you start going on that road, you say there would be another development, housing development, because they take up a lot of farmland on a production So I'm just pointing that out, you know, that this is really something of more of a property rights issue. I'd be careful about saying, you know, what we're going to allow and not allow. I guess that's the only comments I want to make at this point until I make some other comments. Like I say, I think it's a little bigger picture for me than this development. My biggest concern is they select a site, they know they're going to need us to go away from our ordinance or give them a special condition within the permit, and I'm reluctant to do that based on you pick the site, you deal with it. You knew what the conditions were, not you necessarily, but any company knows what the conditions are before they go forward. And that's their decision. And I assume they're going to deal with all those conditions within our ordinance and not come here and ask us to give them special consideration. That's it. Thanks.
Do you have another comment or word? Jean?
I just wanted to address one quick thing about the volume of solar farms that could be coming our way. So we do have 3 more additional applications for special use permits that was submitted within the past couple of weeks. So you will be seeing more of these. And like I said, we have 3 which are in District 1.
This particular site, they show wetlands and what have you. We don't really know whether that is pine farmland or not. Does the guy actually farm the land? Maybe he's trying to get rid of it and have some other revenue from it. So I don't think we can say that they're taking up necessarily pine farmland. You have a comment now?
Can I ask the staff to, I guess, outline the submission and when the ordinance, the current form came into effect, so that the committee understands that these conditions were new to us as we presented at the commission last week?
Sure. So the zoning ordinance update took effect on January 18th of this year. So your proposals were submitted under the prior ordinance, but all of your conditions basically reflect what is in the ordinance update. So, you know, we made sure that the conditions were there to address anything that may not have been received at time of submission, that we would now require at time of submission. So we're not holding these proposals to any different standards than we would, you know, subsequent proposals that we've received after the zoning ordinance update.
What I'd like to add is about site selection. The rules that are imposed on this project, now every project going forward, those were not available during site selection process of this project. So I guess implying that we knew the rules going into the submission of this isn't entirely accurate, because there were no rules when we submitted. So we're not asking for relief of conditions that we had known about previously. They were added to the project after we had submitted.
Could you tell me if you had to put that power line underneath the pipeline or next to the pipeline, how much additional would that cost?
It's not necessarily a cost. It's really BP's recommendation on a safety level, and if you did end up deciding to go underground, it would be under, I think, it would be encased in certain concrete and amount, and it would have to go down a certain feet. It's just, it started with a safety issue, and then it's a technical challenge on BP, and it was one of those things that they recommended us to go above ground, and that's why we've asked for that condition to be removed.
So the pipeline would prefer it to be above ground?
That's
you're
correct.
saying? Okay. Any other questions by committee? I'd entertain a motion to amend condition number 8 to allow overhead line over the pipeline. We have a motion. And second?
So this is just to amend, it's not to vote on?
For the amendment. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
No. Okay, we have 3 no and 3 yes. So that means,
Motion fails.
that means it's approved.
No, you made the motion and if it didn't pass, it fails.
No, it's 3 and 3. State's attorney? Matt?
That did fail, there's not a majority.
Okay, it's not approved? Okay. All right, then on the total special use permit for this project, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Tom Michael?
Yes.
Judy Rowland? Yes. Steve Balich?
I'll say yes, so it moves forward so we can vote on it at the full board, because Jim brings up a good point about property rights, but at the same time,
Yes or no?
no.
Think
I'm gonna
yes.
make, well, no, we'll say yes. I don't want it to fail. I don't, you know what, I don't like the damn thing. What do you want me to say?
Is there a I don't like the damn thing vote?
He's a yes. I'm gonna be a no.
Lori? Yes. Denise? Yes.
Okay, motion carried.
5-1.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. I might ask the petitioner, do you want us to bring it to the full board about the overdesign, to see if they would be in favor?
Yes, please, that's.
Okay, thank you. Okay, other business, anybody on the committee have any other items they wanted to bring up?
Yes, ma'am.
Steve?
I got a bunch of stuff, but I had some quick ones that were updates. I wanted to find out, the first one would be the gentleman that wanted to pay his fine for burning in New Lenox, that came to pay his fine here, and nobody would take his money, and he had to come to adjudication. Did we do anything to look into changing our format so a person can pay the fine ahead of time, you know, mailing a check or whatever, without going to adjudication?
That concern was acknowledged last meeting. We reported on to our community development division to work with the adjudication office, and I will follow up with them again the next month and let them know the status.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one was the case that we did on 167th in Galver, in me and Mike Brislone's district with the flooding. It seemed like it was going to come to a resolution, but I want to make sure that the gentleman called you guys and did something to move it forward so it's all settled.
No.
You never called?
You know, because before I think there was limited discussion we could have because of the
I
status.
agree, I'm sorry.
Limited discussion we could have of that because of the citizens' litigation. But I do know, I can tell you there's a meeting today regarding that.
Okay. And then I sent you guys an email. I sent it to Tom and Jim, and it was about floodplains. I don't quite understand it, but the contractor wanted to know why, I guess according to federal law, you're allowed to only build 50% of a house that's destroyed in a floodplain. And then it's up to the government to set whether it's a year, 3 years, or forever, whether, you know, to improve the house again. And our law says it's forever. And, you know, I thought forever is like a real long time. You know, don't, you know, it's like you go to hell or you go to heaven forever. You know, but I mean, it's like, you know, sorry, it just came out. I don't, you know, my brain thinks like that. But, purgatory. No, it's not funny. But the whole point of this thing is, why did we have it forever instead of like a 1 year or a 3 year, when the feds say we could do it at 1, 3, or forever? You know, and so if someone that owns a piece of property that, like in this case, the house burned down, I guess, and then we could build back 50% of the house because it's the federal law with the floodplain, and we follow that law, obviously. So now the guy wants to add on, you know, fix the house to add more to it. Eventually, I suppose, to get to where he was. But floodplains change too, so that's why I said forever is like kind of long. So, you know, could someone explain it? Because I'm really confused on it, because I don't know how to answer that question.
Brian?
Yes, Mr. Balich. I did get that email, and I responded to you yesterday. The department was able to issue the permit in this situation. The applicant met the guidelines that are outlined in the countywide stormwater ordinance, and submitted an appraised value that indicated that the value of the project that they were looking to the improvement for fell under that 50% rule. That comes out of the countywide stormwater ordinance, which I believe was adopted sometime in the mid-90s. I don't have the exact date in front of me. Which that ordinance came from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources model ordinance. So all of the surrounding counties of, what I'd say, the Chicagoland counties adopted that ordinance. And it all has they all include language of what they call a cumulative period for improvements and damage that limits it to 50%. And the way it's worded in the countywide stormwater ordinance, that it is an indefinite period of time. So if the board felt that that period isn't the period that they'd like to look at a different number, that would require the countywide stormwater ordinance to be changed, which isn't only adopted by the county, it's also adopted by all the municipalities in the county. So it's something we could look at, but it would be quite a project to get everybody in Will County to change that.
Was there a reason? I'm just curious.
Well, I guess what I say the reason, I mean, it's true, FEMA does say, I mean, it says right on their website, it could be 5, 10, 15, 20, it could be whatever period they set. And I did a quick, Google, and I found, examples in other jurisdictions that might do 5 years, 10 years, or for the life of the structure itself. So you can come up with a different number. You just have to remember that every time there's a loss, there's a cost to the taxpayers. There's associated costs with flooding of activities that aren't covered by FEMA flood insurance, that the county may bear, that the law enforcement agencies may bear. So every time a project is rebuilt in a floodplain, there's additional costs to the taxpayers that are spread around that aren't reimbursed by the federal government. So it's just something to think about. It's like, what can we live with? Can we live with maybe bearing that cost every 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? You certainly can change it if you want to, but there are reasons to not change it.
Yeah, I didn't know. Well, that's why I brought it up, because I didn't know.
Anything else, Steve?
Yeah, then, no, I know you guys are going to be bringing forward where it says open other business. The 3 or 4 items that we talked about 3 months ago that you guys, for building codes, that we were going to exempt certain things that we all agreed on. But in the meantime, I did some research, and I got I think this concerns what Judy's going to be talking about probably. I got the statute. My friend, the attorney from the state of Illinois, told me, look at the statute, because I found out, I was under the impression that people could sue us and we could be held liable for, not doing permits or anything else. But turns out that according to the statute, they could sue us still, and it costs us money. But at the same time, we're immune. And it's in here, I gave everybody a copy of the statute. And I talked to Phil, and Phil says, yeah, well, that's correct. We have sovereign immunity as a government entity, but anybody can sue anybody. You can sue somebody, say they don't like the way they comb their hair, they can sue you. But at the same time, we don't have, it says right here, I put little arrows where it says that we don't have to enforce any building codes, even though they're on our books. It says that if we go out and inspect something and we inspect it wrong, we're still not liable. And we don't have to have any, you know, all the stuff we've been arguing about pretty much was based on the county getting sued for big money and losing. Well, according to the statute, we might get sued, but we're not going to lose. And I researched the porch collapses in Chicago in 2003, and people sued a city, and it turned out in 2007, the courts ruled that they were not liable. The city was not liable. And they didn't have any permits, you know, for some. But the city wasn't liable whether there was a permit or not a permit. So I just wanted to point that out. And then the other thing was last week, or last month, excuse me, I brought forward more stuff saying that other places like Chicago and Lockport, they exempt certain repair and maintenance items. In the state of Illinois, remember that sheet I handed out? The state of Illinois says that they don't enforce maintenance items on plumbing things. Because I didn't ask about the other stuff, just the plumbing, because I only wanted to do one at a time. But the state says that they don't enforce plumbing repairs and maintenance items. So now, if that's the case, and then they also said that we don't have the right inspector for plumbing, and they do not encourage us to ever get one. And the reason for that, because I called and asked, the reason for that is if we had the right one, then we can turn around and create an ordinance where we could impose all that stuff. But right now, legally, we don't even have the right to impose all that stuff. You know, and then Gideon's over in the audience. I think you can hear me, Gideon. I asked him to do some research about other municipalities and counties and cities or whatever that are looking at their codes for repair and maintenance. And there are other places, and I'm going to ask him to talk about it a little bit, but there are other municipalities or governing bodies that are changing their stuff to exempt the things I'm talking about, just like I'm talking. So you want to speak a little bit to that, Gideon? I'm just bringing it up so that when we start talking about these things, that, you know, there's enough background to realize that I'm not just blowing steam.
So, good morning. Thank you. I'll be brief. Mr. Balich, thanks for contacting me and asking me to reach out. So basically, I started calling other municipalities in Will County just to get a sense of where they do enforce a permit and inspection on different maintenance issues. I haven't gotten through every municipality yet, but just an early indication is that the big one that seems to be exempt is siding repair. Then also windows replacement, so long as there's not a change in size, and doors, as long as there's not a change in size. So once I have the complete list, I'll be willing to share that. I think, you know, it shows a mixed bag, as we said, which just goes to show the county, you know, does have the authority to make those decisions, you know, based on what you think is best for the taxpayers.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So do we want to have Landis talk about the ones we did approve already, or do we want to talk about the plumbing ones that we want to exempt?
Staff, do you have any, you had the three items that you were going to research and see if we can change the language. I know, have you done anything on that yet?
No, I mean, we have the committee's direction on the items that the committee wishes to discuss. You know, those items we're still working on. As of late, we've been more preoccupied with dealing with the open permits issue with the committee and others. So, you know, our hope is to have that soon, but we're not prepared to discuss this at the time, and we have all Mr. Balich's information.
Do you have any comments concerning his talking about not having any plumbing permits or whatever?
for repair and maintenance, not.
I don't have any comment today on that. We'll review it as
The
necessary.
state's attorney, do you have any comments on what Steve is asking for?
It'd cause a change in our ordinance, and that's something that we can look at.
You're saying,
It would cause a change to be made in the ordinance, and that's something that can be looked at, and we'll look at it with.
okay. Steve, if you could write down the exact changes in the ordinance that you want, and bring it to the committee, and we can make a recommendation to staff to revise the ordinance.
What I'd like to do is, when you're making the ordinance, I'm talking about repair and maintenance items. So just to be clear, so like shut-off valves, if you're replacing your sink, you can do the traps, your toilet traps, you know, just things that people normally do anyway. That's with the plumbing stuff. I don't know, if you're looking into it, you might as well look into all the other ones, the water heaters and, you know, all this. Most of the cities do except for water heaters. I don't know why, but they do. So anyway, if you could look at all that, and I asked Tom, could you put it on the actual agenda for an agenda item instead of
Well, I've
another?
been waiting for staff to bring back their recommendation or their language that they want to put in the ordinance before we get it on the agenda. But if you have specific items, I think you need to put it in writing, not just over the verbally. You have to write it
Right,
down.
well, the specific item has been talked about numerous times. They were just, you know, I can't tell you, say, which ones. I'm not a plumber, I'm not an electrician, I'm not a carpenter. So I'm saying if it's a minor repair, the state of Illinois doesn't say all of them. It says minor repairs. That's what it says from the state of Illinois. We all got the letter, I brought it. So I'm saying the same thing. We should exempt minor repairs. That doesn't mean building a whole new building, just a minor repair.
David?
Yeah, I think it's clear the committee's direction that was given to the department and staff. We'll follow up on it. And we have been all of Mr. Balich's submissions as well. And when we go through and do the research, we present it to the committee and take the committee's additional direction on what they desire.
Okay, thank you. Ray, do you have a comment?
Yes, I just have one thing. You had brought up the outstanding open permit, you know, with the liens and everything that we had. Can you give us an update on that? I'm just really concerned. I think at some point we're just going to have to remove those liens from those individuals' houses because I think, this is sitting so not right with me. And I think it's created something that should not have been created. I think we should remove those liens from those individuals' property.
I agree with Ray.
I will say, well, first of all, it's the recordations that have occurred in the past. There are notices of violation. There's no liens that are recorded against the properties. It's just a notice on the deed that there's an open violation with the county. I will say is that as late as yesterday, we had an internal meeting, including with the Chief of Staff of the board, as well as Chief of Staff of the Executive's Office to review the matter. And we are proceeding with that. We're going to be reviewing the order permits again to identify where there has been a transition in ownership, as well as perhaps going down to detail of on the order permits what the types of permits were, to see if there's any easy resolution to those. So there is further discussion as to how to further, I guess, address the older open permits. We all are also looking at alternatives for addressing going forward. Permits that we identify that people fail to file and close. But we do have a procedure and process currently in place right now with, now that we're almost current up to speed with, or up to date on the open permits, where, for example, right now, because of technology, what we do is we actually make a phone call to the individuals a month before the permit expires to, I guess, to address the situation with them, to engage them. And so the 2016 permits, for example, that moved into 17 would be followed up on. There's only a handful that we're not able to close with the individual get to the finals or get them to inspection. So those numbers have been drastically reduced. So we're also looking at alternatives going forward with that is to, if we continue forward with some alternatives to that. But again, we are meeting with chief of staff of both offices to try to set a resolution.
Jim, you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Tom. These notices of violation that go on the deed, quite frankly, I think we should remove them all. And let's go through a process, make a determination of how we're going to resolve these issues of people complying. I do think there's another issue. There's a whole different issue when people, when the houses changed hands, maybe once, twice, maybe even 3 times, looking at how old some of these permits are. I don't know. I think it should be a last resort. Not. It appears that you put these notices of violation on these deeds pretty quickly as a means of trying to get people to comply. It's a little heavy-handed, in my opinion. You know, whether you have the authority to do it or not, I certainly think that this is something that should have been brought to this committee about the issue and about putting these notices of violations on deeds. I would even go as far, I just talked to the state's attorneys here, maybe that's not for us to do. Maybe it is for the state's attorney's office to do when people can't comply. Maybe there's some other action. Maybe the letter should come to the state's attorney's office, not the land use department. But it seems to me that putting a notice of violation on a deed should be something of last resort, not a form of a way of trying to get somebody to comply, because that's the easiest way for us, or not us, or the land use department, or the state's attorney's office, or whoever. So, I'm fairly confident that 99% of people will comply. I don't think these be handled, be heavy-handed. And in many cases, they may not even know that they have this notice of violation. They find out when they go to sell their house. So, or for some reason they look it up. So, I think we should remove them all. And if we get a situation where we absolutely have somebody who's not going to be compliant, then we put it on. But let's run the string of trying to get people to comply first. And it seems to me that's not the process we use. Letter went out, that some consider a little heavy-handed, a little maybe threatening, and then they get these notice of violation on their deed. Here again, he's a little heavy-handed to me. So I think we should take them all off. And now let me ask, I'll ask the state's attorney's office, can the ones that have been put on by the land use department, can we pass something at the board level, removing them, and then if the state's attorney's office wants to go ahead and put them on, we'll leave that up to you.
You could pass a resolution to have them removed, but if you want to do that, you could pass a resolution to just say they're all forgiven. Well, if you don't want to have mechanisms to enforce our ordinances, you don't have to. That is a policy decision to make. But I want to point out something, that the ones that got these notices were notified first that it could happen. They've already been notified and don't find out when they just try to sell, because the date they got recorded, the recorder of deeds sent them all a notice.
Okay.
And this is the 5% that didn't do it. We got approximately 398 left, and it was, I think, over 4,000. Well, I guess it's 10%, but it was over 4,000 when we started, and everybody else came into compliance. So,
By the way, I find that an amazing number, 4,000.
all right, what was the actual number, guys?
It's around 3,500.
All right, I
Well, I mean,
overestimated.
no, I find that an extraordinary number, that many records out there.
There were.
That's our failure.
It is, and that's why we're addressing going forward that this will never happen again. The issue isn't not preventing it in the future. That's already being
It's
in
already
the
been
process.
addressed, right?
What we're trying to do is figure out what to do with the almost 400 we have out there, and we're working on it. We have the treasurer's office researching to differentiate between who was the original property owner that still owns the property versus if there was a sale or not. We've envisioned and discussed we would handle them in two separate manners. It's already been informed to these people that, well, the policy is they get another inspection at no cost. We're not trying to economically hurt them. We just want to make sure that our housing stock is up to snuff and that nobody is hurt by it. We have some issues involving swimming pools, which if it had electricity and they weren't wired right, somebody could die. Or if there's not a fence around it, a child could fall in and drown. We have issues that involve possibly water heaters and or furnaces where carbon monoxide could build up if they weren't vented properly. These are actual life and safety issues. And we are trying to determine that. So we are trying to make the problem go away. We don't imagine these notices of violation will stay on their books long because whoever does it come into compliance. My recommendation is going to be the state's attorney's office is going to take them to court to force compliance because we got to get them in compliance to maintain our housing stock and to keep our safety of our generalized citizens there. And so it is getting taken care of.
Yeah, Phil, I don't disagree with what you're saying, except when you want to take it to the extreme, like we don't have to have any enforcement. I mean, that's not the intent here. You know, the intent is to treat people in a fair manner, and I agree. All these outstanding permits that did not receive final inspection need to be taken care of. Of course, I think we can prioritize those depending on what it is.
And we're in the process of taking the more serious ones first, yeah.
You know, those certainly should be pursued. And I'm not so sure some of this should have been pursued out of the state's attorney's office from the beginning. So it's not about us trying to, and by the way, I do believe that for some, if it was the state's attorney's office, maybe they would have viewed it or taken it more seriously or said, I have to get this done. But that's, so I have no problem with the state's attorney's office intervening to bring the process forward to get the inspections done. But in the meantime, I still think we have to be sensitive to, in some cases, I'm not sensitive to every one of these cases. You know, I mean, if it involves electricity or plumbing or life safety issues, I agree with you. Those need to be taken care of. You know, but those that are not, and they kind of leaning on people that are unaware of it, or, you know, or it requires people going into their homes, then maybe we need to be a little more flexible because they're working. So maybe we'll say we'll come to your house on Saturday or Sunday and do it. You know, and we don't know as to why there's issues of them not complying. We may just be that. I don't know, but I mean, so I think there's more we can do. After all, I think it's their responsibility to call for final inspection. A lot of homeowners may not be aware of it, right? I've had work done by contractors. I just assume they're taking care of it, right? So, and when I was did more commercial stuff, I made sure it was inspected myself. The contractor were getting it inspected. But I guess all I'm saying is that we dropped the ball too. You know, so, and obviously, you know, I understand we're correcting this going forward. I'm thinking I'm taking too long on that.
Okay, Reagan, would you like to make a comment?
I know this was
discussed at a previous committee executive, and I gave you all some numbers then, and, you know, to me, this is about facts and exact numbers, not about that these are many property owners, that new property owners, that, where there's a transfer. I want exact numbers, and I don't want false information or guesstimates going before you, and that is what I will tell you, our staff, our state's attorney, our land use staff, Nick and I have been working on this for you. It's become daily, I promise, and I know some of you I have individually talked to. Even yesterday, we met for about an hour, I think, and like what Bill was saying, he was in the meeting, Mary Teacher was too, was even out of some of those notices, you guys have to understand that 42 of them are open code enforcement that could be safety issues. You know, there's 2 resource and recovery issues dealing with the IPEA. There's 1 site development issue. These are issues that we can't just waive, and I would caution you against something like that. But we keep digging deeper and deeper for you. As Phil stated, Brian Radner has already given that 398 notice number to the treasurer's office, and we talked about that yesterday. Just this morning, I saw Brian McDaniel, and I followed up with him, and I asked him, please, can I get that number by the end of this week for you? And what that number is this guesstimate, this many property transfer number. I want the exact number, and hopefully I'll have that this week, whether it was the current owner that took that permit out, or whether there was a transfer of ownership. And I think that's a crucial number that you all are looking for. So I want you guys to know that we are working diligently on this, and if you have any questions, if you want to come to some of these meetings, Tom Weigel and Herb Brooks did attend the meeting yesterday. So rather than just staff, I had some county board members there.
Thank you.
Question for you on that. Didn't we just close anything prior to 2011?
So, if you recall, Mike did an update on this exact process in September of last year, and at that point, it had previously been determined that, and this is something they had developed with the state's attorney's office, that they were going to focus on the years from 2011 through 2015. At that point, our 16 permits were still open because you could have a permit, have it extended, so those weren't included. Anything before 10, it's still open, and we may have recorded a notice at some time in the past, but those permits were just going to remain open, and they were going to deal with them as people came in to the office to get a new building permit. We wouldn't issue a new building permit until they closed the old thing. That's how they were going to deal with it. That's what they determined at the time, that they thought it was fair to look at the 11s through the 15s and see if we could work with them to close out their permits through the process that involved the notices on the property if they did not respond.
So just for clarification, just so I understand, on 2011 to 2015, any open building permit that wasn't satisfied, we put the notice on their property.
After contacting them and giving them an opportunity to contact the department to close the permit.
Right.
Close the permit at no cost.
Right.
No inspection costs, absolutely no fines. We're not looking for fines in any of these situations. Then notice is recorded. I don't want to say exactly, but about a month later if we didn't get a response. Then the recorder generated a notice saying that this notice of violation has been recorded. You need to contact the department to have it removed. So that was the second notice.
I understand that. So that's 2011 to 15.
Yes.
Anything prior to that, even though, we've heard about the life safety issues and we have to be concerned about X, Y, and Z, we're not worried about those people.
They were, at that point, they had made the decision that they were not going to record a notice. What they were going to do was wait until they came into the office to apply for another permit for something and deal with the problem at that point. That was the decision.
So why didn't we do that for 11 through 15?
I can't speculate. I didn't make that decision.
If it was okay to not worry about it until they came to us.
I think the only thing that I do recall is that there was a better chance that they may still be working with the same property owner, or it's fresher in their mind that maybe this had happened. So that was the thought at the time, that they had reached the conclusion that that's how they were going to approach it after discussing it with the state's attorney's office on how to handle the matter. So those people aren't necessarily, they're not in a position of, when I say that group of people from 2010 and all the way before, they still have an open permit and it still needs to be resolved. It was just that they had made the decision that they weren't going to record any notice on the property.
So they may not know they have an open permit.
They may not.
So they may not know.
But
Okay.
just so you know, the process of recording violation notices, just notice, not a lien, a notice on a property, started in 2010. And before that, the county did not do that. They took everybody to court. That was how they used to do it. So from 2010 through 2016, there are some notices during that period that have been recorded that go back, it's almost maybe 15 years. I think I saw a 2002 permit in there. So there are 16 years.
I just want to say a few comments based on what's already been said and what Reagan mentioned. One, the process has been improved to avoid this from happening again. We are using a better technology, so that I'm just going to leave it at that. It's been improved. That's number one. Number two, and I don't know if all the committee members or the board members have seen the letter that went out, but if it hasn't, I would encourage all of you to take a look at that letter, because I've heard many times that it's a threatening letter, and I have had the chance to review it, and you may have a different opinion, but it is not a threatening letter. It is telling them what the situation is, and it uses please and thank you, and it's not threatening in any way. The other issue that we want to send another letter to let these outstanding people know, that remind them, because this was said previously, they can get this inspection and close it out if the work's been done for free. There's no added cost. The only cost would be if they took out a permit, didn't do the work, or didn't do it correctly, then there would be a cost, but that's their responsibility. So there's no added county cost to get the final inspection and clean the record off. The other thing is, there's not, to our knowledge, been any sales of homes. Now, there may be out there, we just don't know about it, but there's none that have failed because of this. There was one we're aware of that someone said, oh, this is on there, and in order to get the sale done, they removed it with the understanding that they were going to put it back on because they weren't going to solve the issue because they were a new owner. But I would think, as someone who's bought a few homes, that you would like to know if there is a potential safety issue in your home, if you're going to put your family in there. So I think it's a right to know for the new owners, because that is a real concern. That's where we're trying to get to the bottom of how many of these are the current owner, was the person who took the permit and did or didn't do the work, versus how many were transferred, because then they're a victim of not knowing if we don't tell them. And then the last issue, I guess, is there are harsher options, I guess, which we have not asked to do, or we could send these all to administrative adjudication, but then they're going to have to stand before an administrative adjudication judge and pay fines and be taken to task in a way, I mean, for that. Or we could go, as the state's attorney suggests, we could put them all in court. We don't want to do that either. We're trying. I think over the years, a lot of these have been somewhat leniency to try to get people in compliance. That's the whole idea of administrative adjudications, to get compliance, not to beat people up. But they take out a permit to do work, we should finish up. And if we do anything short of that, if we just wave the wand and say we're going to forget about these, as some, not maybe board members, but others have suggested, what message does that send to the public? Get a permit, don't fulfill it, we're not going to hold you accountable. I think that's the wrong message to send, because communities that have good building codes and enforcement, I think, are stronger because people have confidence in the housing stock and the rules and regulations. So we are working on this, and we will have more information at a later date. So I just thank you.
Judy, you have a comment?
So a couple different things here. Number one, my main issue still is that this problem came up. The only reason I knew that this problem existed was because I got a letter. Shortly thereafter that, several months later, one of my constituents also received a letter. So if you want to say it's not threatening, you may say that, but when you receive the letter, it's threatening. if I don't respond within 21 days, then this notice is going to be filed on my deed or whatever. So here's the thing, though. The letter from my constituent was dated January 26th, but it wasn't even stamped till January 29th. So the dates were 3 days short, number one. Okay, so that's in there. I think if somebody had it, didn't even remember. These people don't even remember. You have people out there from 2002, Brian said. 2002, they probably don't even know that these permits were never closed. In my case, I had windows installed by a company. They got the permit. We assumed that they handled it all. How do I know? They're gone doing this stuff while I'm not even home, I'm at work, assuming that it got done. So if you don't even know that you have that situation, then it's a surprise to you that you didn't get it. My constituent had a letter, because he had gotten a community concerns grant. The letter said at the bottom, this is your final inspection. So this person assumed that his was done, although then he gets a letter saying it wasn't. The letter to them is not specific as to, it just says building permit number such and such for a vague kind of a description. It's not even, you don't even always know what it is that it's referring to. You say you're sending out a new letter?
We haven't,
No.
because we're waiting
Oh,
for
you
this
haven't
process
sent it. Okay.
to play itself out.
No, now you said there's no cost to clean off the record, so if somebody calls, they want to do this, if you send out another letter, whatever the process is determined, and if there's no cost to the landowner for that, there was no cost to our department to record it?
No.
No cost either way?
No. So with the recording and the release, there's zero cost to the county to actually do that. The recorder's office is not charging the land use department for that. And we work with everybody as quickly as possible. As soon as somebody calls for the inspection, they're probably going to have it the next day or within the next couple of days, if that's convenient for them. And as soon as they pass it, come back in the office, we release it immediately. We go right over to the recorder's office and process the release.
Okay, that's good. And then, Nick, you mentioned that there are harsher steps to take. So here's my whole thing. I've heard a million things about this, and the process is always the landowner is responsible for calling for the final inspection. I'm sorry. They're our customer. It is our responsibility to do it. Then I've been told it was a paper system. You know what? Baloney on that. Baloney, I don't care. I'm not going to stand for any excuse as to why land use didn't, and I'm not saying you guys, because most of you weren't here from 2002 when all this craziness probably began. But it really is bad to say it was all on the landowner. No, it was on the land use department. That is their job. Their job, somebody, I don't know who, I've never been told the name of the individual or individuals that didn't do their job. That person somebody issues the permit, somebody's assigned the permit, somebody must be assigned to close out the permit. Somebody must be assigned to certain groups of things. It's just not permits flying all over the place. So somebody in that land use department didn't do their job, and they should have done their job, and it shouldn't be open from something as far back as 2002, and to start with 3,500 permits that are open and not been closed is rather insane. And I think we need to, I'm guessing a decision was made for those that were older that they didn't close it out because it was a cost, that to print the letter, put it in an envelope, send it to everybody. There were about 2,000 of those. There's a cost there. Maybe that was the decision. I think that those people shouldn't be caught off guard that there was this permit still open. So I don't buy the arguments or anything like that. And what I do want to know is, well, we have a new online system before we had a paper system. Okay, I wrote code. I designed systems. A system is only going to do so much. There's still a human intervention. So I want to know what process is in place when somebody is issued gets a new permit. I know we're not closing out many right now because you have a year or whatever. So when that person takes their permit out, what is the plan to do it? What does the current system do? Does the current system send somebody an email in the department? Does the current system create a report? Does the current system generate a letter to the landowner saying that it's going to expire or it has expired? Those kind of steps I'd like to see what our process is. So I know, but I'm asking that. I want to know what it is.
David?
I'll let Brian speak to the permit process. And Board Member O'Gall, I know you indicated that, Brian isn't necessarily involved in prior decisions, but I can assure you that the staff that we have right now is doing their job with regarding the permit process. And as Brian will explain, some of the processes that are implemented under Mike 10, how effective they've been, and where we're going with the current permit process. Also too, just I want to emphasize too, is that, we, with, both chiefs of staff as the department, we recognize there's a concern that the board has presented to us. And what we're desiring is a solution to the issue that's been presented to us. And, as contrary to what may have been presented before, is that, we're not telling you what to do, or the board or the executive's office. We can give you our professional recommendation. But we'll be looking to you for the directions to ultimately, how do we want to do this? And that's the process we're working through. We've been working with Reagan. We met this ladies yesterday. So we're focused on a solution to this and trying to address the concerns you brought forward. And with that, I'll let Brian explain the process with the permit.
Brian? All right, thank you, members of the committee. So there's a couple of things we're doing to make sure that we don't get in this position again. There is one person who, as one of their tasks, is who gets a daily report, because the system that we use now produces a report to say what permits are expiring when, so they get a daily report. And basically it's about 1 month out from when the permit's going to expire. They get a list of the properties every day that are closing, the permits that are closing in on expiring. We contact the person multiple ways, either by phone or email or letter, whatever. Whatever contact method we have, we contact the person and we check in. We say, your permit's about ready to expire. Do you want to extend it? Why have you not acted on it? So try to ascertain the situation and make a decision on what needs to be done. In most of the cases, that's going to take care of everything right there. Because the permit's still fresh in their mind, maybe they're choosing they're not going to go forward with the work, we'll just close it. Maybe they do want to go forward, we'll extend it. So we can do all those things. So that's one way of looking at it. Another thing that we do is that last year we processed over 3,300 building permits, and I don't want to say half, but close to half of those permits are permits that we call same-day permits, which we can issue when somebody comes in. It's like the roofing permit. So there's only one inspection on a roofing inspection, and that's the final inspection. So what do? When they come in, we tell the contractor that or the homeowner, we are scheduling that roof inspection today. The day we issue your permit, we're scheduling the inspection, and it's going to happen 6 months out. If you complete it before then, contact the department, and we'll come out earlier and do the inspection. So we're already setting up the inspection to do the work, and that takes care of another set of permits that could have gone expired if nobody called. Then another thing that we do is our inspectors use the software service that we have on their iPads, and they can pull up a map of all the open permits in the area. So if they're in an area doing an inspection on something else, they can open up the map and they can see what permits are open, look at them, see what those permits are, and then go to those houses, and if there's something that they can do to close those out immediately, then that's something that they do. So those are 3 things that we're doing right now to make sure that we don't get in this situation right now. And as far as I can tell, it's been very helpful. For 2016, the county has only recorded 18 notices. So the process is working. 2016, I think we had 2,700 permits. So 18 of 2,700 were people that didn't want to follow through with closing it. So we started using SmartGov in June of 2016, and if you look at maybe 6 months to a year out, then you go back and you look at those people that didn't follow through. So it's only been a small number. So I think it's effective now.
Okay, so with Reagan working with you, it would be very good to know the notifications that were filed, what was the work that was done on them. Because, there's differences of opinion as to whether something's a life safety or not a life safety. If the furnace was bad, they're dead. They're dead already. They're no longer living if the furnace was bad or something like that happened. So, I mean, the point is like, I want to see the process going forward. I know you guys have a new one. I would like to see the letter that you are sending out when a person's, before their permit expires, if you're sending a letter, if you're making a call, just so we can see what it is. I don't think it should be threatening to say if you don't respond within a certain amount of time, the first contact with the landowner should not be threatening to say you're going to record anything on anything. That's threatening. Maybe Nick doesn't think so. He's a government employee. I haven't worked for the government as long as he has. So when I'm the landowner in my own home and I get a letter like that, I feel that it's threatening. So I would like us to be able to see that. And I just think that we should continue with Reagan giving us the information that you guys are looking for. But I still say the landowner is not the final person responsible. Land use department is. And it's unfair that these notices got filed on theirs deeds when they may not even be the landowner anymore. So I'll keep that update on that.
I agree with Judy, and I do have a different slant that really needs to be addressed. In 2003, when we were talking about porch collapses in Chicago, some people had permits, some people didn't. But the courts ruled that the city wasn't liable for any of this stuff. Well, the city of Chicago, ones that were inspected, when they did an advanced inspection, they found out that the city of Chicago didn't find structural things that were real bad. But the court still ruled, even though the inspectors didn't find anything wrong at first, when they did the advanced inspection, they did find stuff wrong, that the city still wasn't liable. So what I'm getting at is that just because we have a building inspector come out and look at this stuff doesn't mean that the job was done right. So we have to, we're talking about life safety and all this stuff all the time. Everything is life safety. Yet, we don't have fences along, for pools. With a 2-foot pool, you have to have a fence if it's 2 feet deep, but we don't have to require a fence for people that own land on a river that covers the whole river, so nobody can walk in the river and drown. I mean, there's things that you can point out in the laws that are goofy for everything. But what I'm getting at is just because we say it's all clear doesn't mean it really is all clear. So we have to be careful when we say it's life safety, because just walking outside is life safety. So, like the furnace, well, really it's true. I mean, a furnace is life safety if it isn't put in right, but a homeowner or a business isn't going to put in a furnace unless they know how to do it. So they probably call somebody else up that's a furnace person that knows how to do it, puts it in. And so I understand why you're saying, well, we need to inspect it, but at the same time, that doesn't mean it's done right. And I thank you guys for realizing, you're saying that you'll follow the policies that we set, because that's important. So we don't have to be in an adversarial role all the time, because it's a joint thing that we work together and come up with a good plan. But, and Gideon's been out there listening. I was wondering if he had any thoughts on this.
All right, if I make 30 seconds.
Why don't you come up to the podium?
State your name, Gideon.
Yeah, please. In case no one knows who you are.
So thank you for your time. I'm Gideon Bluestein with the Illinois Realtors Association. I just want to clarify a couple of issues. I appreciate the discussion. It's an important issue. The realtors take it seriously because having a notice recorded on somebody's title could cloud the title and cause a transaction to fall apart. And I'm also pleased that there is a solution going forward. So this issue won't come up again. And it sounds like as of this morning, we've identified that it only applies to 398 properties. So good. That's a good thing, right? We can figure out a solution for those 398 properties. The one sticking point that I want to put out is, one, we're not opposed as a realtors organization to open permits being closed. We want the permits to be closed. We want to make sure that we're protecting life safety and preserving good housing stock. The issue that we brought up is that basically what the county has decided to do with these 398 is say, okay, we sent you a letter, you didn't respond, we're going to make notice recorded on your title. We've now washed our hands of the situation. So if you really are truly concerned about life safety, I would think that there would be other avenues that can be pursued to try and close those permits, right? And we're not opposed to pursuing other avenues to close those permits. What we are opposed to is the notice being recorded on the title. In particular, when I had Sorling Northrop, which is our external legal counselor, do an analysis of the Will County Code, it actually showed that the code was not followed in terms of how these notices were recorded. So, we do appreciate dealing in facts, and we do want to deal in facts. The fact of the matter is, these notices were recorded on title without following the county code, and so they need to be removed. That's the bottom line. The notices need to be removed, and we need to find an alternate way to get these permits closed. Thank you.
Correctly.
Thank you. State's Attorney, have you looked at that?
Yeah, we don't agree with this outside counsel's interpretation that the notice wasn't pursuant to the code. We feel we did have the ability to put the notices on. Again, it's only a notice. It is, you can notice anything with the recorder's office. Unless it's something false or puts a lien improperly on property for a money value that you don't have the right to put on, then it's a criminal offense. And the bottom line is, we didn't just notice 398. We noticed others, and the notice caused the people or triggered the people to come in and get their inspection done, and then we promptly removed it. That was another mechanism to get the people into compliance, short of going through the administrative adjudication or injunctive relief or a fine through the courts. And we can clearly do that. I can, if you want me to, tomorrow I can do 398 withdrawals or releases of those notices and file 398 list pendants, because now we're taking you to court. You're going to have to pay a filing fee to even answer our complaint because it's civil in nature, even though it's for money damages. We're going to ask for injunctive relief. We're going to ask the courts to order inspections of your property against your will. We don't want to do that. We're trying to do it the polite way. We're trying to do it the cooperative way. We are doing it that way. We are working at solving this problem. We're going to get these 398 taken care of. When you make it down to 5 or 6 at the end, then we do have to take to court because there's no other way to do it. But the way we're progressing is the way that we have to. Again, the land use department doesn't have the ability to waive this stuff. The county board, if you wanted to waive them tomorrow, you could do a resolution to say these are old. We figure somebody would already died by now if it was a problem, and we're just going to release them all. You could do that. They can't. They have to follow the ordinances that you gave them already. It doesn't give them the discretion to not want to do these things. All they're doing is trying to live up to what you requested them to do. And I think that they are doing that, and they found a problem and they're solving the problem. Not just going forward, but they feel they had to take this class of cases and correct them. And if it's something you don't want them to do, you can do a resolution and say, don't do it. You have the ability to wave the magic wand and say, as a matter of policy, these are old. We want to balance our books. We're not going to make them come into compliance, but going forward we are. I mean, you can make that policy. The executive's office can't. Land use as a branch of it can't. So, I mean, it's really the ball's in your hand with what you want to do.
Okay, Laura, you have a comment?
Yeah, this is going to be quick and hopefully we're done. Reagan, land use, Nick, thank you. Nobody said that to you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you. As a homeowner and landowner myself, not a huge piece of land, I never assume anything. If someone's coming into my home and doing work that's going to impact my family or safety, I don't assume anything. But that's just in my nature, is my background. So I follow through and check on everything. And I would hope that the people that are having the work done would feel the same way too. I want to get my money's worth. I want to make sure that everything is what it is supposed to be. Otherwise, we end up having issues down the line with things. As far as people dying of a furnace, it's bad. My sister-in-law had an issue with her furnace with carbon monoxide. By the grace of God, besides them falling up against the walls and blacking their eyes, they were able to get out of the house. Again, it was put in a long time ago. It was nothing that was in my sister-in-law's control, but after that, the work permits were gotten. They had a decent person come in and put it, and it was cleared. We never, ever assume that the work is appropriate. So yes, you should always get the final inspection. I agree.
Judy?
So I think when somebody gets a permit to put a door in, it's pretty obvious the door is working correctly. And if the person hired somebody to do it who got the permit, many people don't see anything besides their contractor went and got the permit to do that, and they made that assumption. It's a door. I had windows put in. They came to see that my windows were actually in and my house wasn't boarded up. I told them it wasn't, and I actually had windows in. So it's whatever. So I guess I have another question. I know that Mary Tatro had made a comment that we needed to make a change to the ordinance. I was wondering what change that was.
I don't know.
You'll have to ask her.
She mentioned that in our last executive committee meeting.
I don't know what the nature of the conversation was to know what.
It was regarding this exact situation.
So in the one section of the building ordinance, it talks about notice being filed at the circuit clerk's office, which is it's assuming that it's a legal proceeding. That's how the ordinance reads. And I think that was brought up because Mr. Bluestein over here had pointed out that that section referenced the circuit clerk and not the recorder's office. It's our legal counsel's opinion that that still is an acceptable way of recording notice, though.
I don't know. Well,
No, I think, now that he said it, I think, Mary, that is what she said, that we need to take out the word circuit clerk. Because that would mean, that's referring to, you record it when we file a list pendants. If we went to court for enforcement and file with the circuit clerk, then you can record that. You can do that by operational law without it being in our ordinance. You don't need everything to be in your ordinance. There's certain things that happen by operation of law. I don't need permission of your ordinance to file a list pendants with the recorder when we go to the circuit clerk and file a case.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Anything else? Any public comment? We have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second, all in favor, say aye.